Hello. By now your research plan is taking shape quite nicely. It's time to progress from the background and goals of your study to your plans for actually carrying it out. In this video, we'll discuss these logistical details, which are known as the methodology. Methodology is the fifth element of your UX research plan. The methodology is the steps you take to conduct your research. Your methodology will list the procedures you'll use while collecting the information you need to answer your research questions. This should include the time and place of the product tests and interviews, as well as who will conduct them and how. There are a few reasons why you want to include methodology in your research plan. First, the methodology informs your stakeholders of what will happen during the study, how long the study is, and where it will take place. Second, detailing your methodology will give stakeholders more confidence in your study's results because they can see all of the steps. This makes it more likely they'll act on your suggestions. Finally, the methodology provides the details that other researchers need to repeat the exact same study in the future. In order for your research to be reliable, you need to document it in a way that another researcher could repeat it and find similar results. So for our dog walking app, we will conduct a usability study on March 12th and March 13th during normal business hours on March 12th and another after hours on March 13th. We will interview 5 participants individually, and that's it. You've nailed the fifth element of your UX research plan, the methodology. On to the next element, participants. See you there. Hi again. As you know, the field of UX is all about the user. We're moving into an exciting element of the UX research plan where we focus on the very important people who you will study, your participants. The participants you select represent the voice of real users, so this is an important part of your research plan. Keep in mind that how and where you find study participants will depend on where you work. Regardless, there are a few things you should include in this part of your research plan. To get started, your research plan should include a list of the primary characteristics of the people you will recruit to participate in the study. Have a good reason for each and every characteristic. The types of participants you select should be based on your research goals. For example, for a usability study for a dog walking app, you might want to recruit participants who are dog owners with full-time jobs and who go out for activities more than once a week. Detailing these characteristics is important because you want participants in the study to have things in common with your ultimate end user. In addition, listing characteristics of participants helps you avoid sample bias. You may remember that sample bias happens when you unintentionally choose study participants from a select group. While you want participants to have things in common with your end users, you still need to make sure that participants are representative of all users to make sure your results aren't skewed. You'll also want to create and include a link to a form called a screener survey, which you'll use to ask potential participants a series of questions to see if they meet your desired characteristics. In addition, you need to think through how to get participants to be part of your study, known as the incentive. The incentive also provides a way to thank participants for their time and feedback. For example, you could compensate them with cash or a gift card, or enter them into a raffle for a prize. One more thing, it's important to engage participants with diverse perspectives and abilities for every product you design. For example, if you're designing an app to help people hire dog walkers, you might assume that your target user is someone who currently walks their dog twice per day and is tight on time. One characteristic, then, would be someone who walks their dog regularly. But what about users with visual impairments? They might also be interested in your dog walking app, so you need to make sure your app is compatible with screen readers. When recruiting participants for your usability study, you want to have a representative sample. The small group of participants in your usability study should represent your key user group, as well as user groups that are often marginalized. The goal of a usability study is to collect honest feedback from users, so you want to gather feedback from people with really diverse perspectives. In addition, you should also engage participants with diverse abilities during your usability studies. Understanding how people with disabilities use your product is a crucial part of the UX research and design process. If your product isn't already compatible with assistive technology, then you need to investigate how people with disabilities interact with your product. Don't assume you already know the workarounds that someone uses to navigate a product that wasn't designed with their specific needs in mind. Participants in a usability study can provide this feedback firsthand. There are many different ways to recruit potential users for your study that would include people with disabilities. To learn more, check out the reading that follows this video. With all of this in mind, you should be able to complete the sixth element of your UX research plan, participants. Without people to participate in your study, the study won't happen at all, so it's important to really get this part right. There's only one element to go. In the next video, we'll discuss the script, which is also known as the discussion guide. Let's get to it. Finally, we've made it to the last element of your research plan, the script. Keep in mind that the script is sometimes also referred to as the discussion guide. Interviewing users isn't just chatting with people. It's about getting to the core of what a user is trying to do, how they think and feel, and what their problems are. Your interview questions should be well thought out, consistent between the participants, and purposeful to get the data you need for useful insights. Even though it might feel a little robotic to read from a script during a usability study, there are a couple good reasons to do it. Two of the main reasons we use scripts is that we don't forget any instructions, and so we keep language consistent for each participant. Have you ever gone to the doctor's, intending to ask a bunch of questions, only to realize when you get home that you forgot to ask the most important one? Me too. That's frustrating in our personal lives, but it can create errors in a usability study. Prepare ahead of time to avoid having to redo the study. With this in mind, here are some tips for writing interview questions. First and foremost, use the same set of questions for each interview. Usually, usability studies focus on one person at a time, and you want your conversations with each person to be about the same product features. For your user interviews to be consistent, you need to use the same base set of questions every time. Don't improvise or ask random questions to different participants. Second, ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions like, how did you feel about, and what bothered you about, are key to finding out what people are trying to do and what their problems are. Avoid yes or no questions because they can shut down detailed answers. Third, encourage elaboration. Sometimes in an interview, users answer a question briefly. For example, I didn't like that search page. If the user stopped there, you wouldn't know what part of the search page they didn't like or why they didn't like it. A good interviewer will then say, "Oh, tell me more about that," to encourage elaboration. This is when you get the best information from your participant. Fourth, ask the same question from different angles. Interviewees often need a little time to get comfortable and used to the interview format, so it may take a while before you get to the core of what they really think. With that in mind, consider asking the same general question from multiple angles over the course of the interview. For example, you might ask, how often do you walk your dog at the start of the interview? Then, how many times a week does your dog need a walk in the middle of the interview? You'll probably get more detailed, useful data this way. Next, don't mention other users. Mentioning other users sets up possible privacy violations, and discussing how other users felt about the product being tested could bias the answers from your current participant. Finally, don't ask leading questions. Leading questions are questions designed to elicit a specific response. If you're a fan of courtroom dramas, you may have heard this sentence coming out of a lawyer's mouth: "Objection, leading the witness." You may not actively be trying to trick a study participant into giving a certain answer, but if you provide a possible response like, "Was it easy to find the checkout cart?" you're leading the person answering the question toward an answer. That will provide bad data. So how do you actually write a script for a usability study in the real world? There are a few different parts of a script, which we'll go through in order. To get started, welcome participants to the study and thank them for their time. All usability studies should be recorded so that your team can rewatch them later. You need to let the participant know that you will record the study, and you need to ask the participant for consent to record. Then, learn the participant's basic information like name, age, and occupation. It's most common to do this by asking simple questions like, "What is your name?" In addition, it's important to remind participants before the study begins that they are not being tested. The goal is to provide honest feedback about the prototype or product they are testing. There are no right or wrong answers. And before you jump into the study itself, give participants the opportunity to ask questions. Now that you have the introduction out of the way, you're ready to provide usability tasks. These are the assignments given to participants that allow you to observe what they do. One way to make them sound less intimidating to participants is to call them activities during the usability study. So how do you come up with the tasks? Usability tasks should be based on the research goals written in your research plan. Tasks should also be specific, make participants take action, and avoid providing any clues on how to complete the task. Let's try to write a task together for the study we're conducting on the dog walking app. Our research goal was to determine if the app we designed is easy or difficult to use. Based on this goal, one task we could ask participants to do is book a dog walker on Friday at 2 p.m. Lastly, after the participant completes the usability tasks, you're ready to wrap things up. Ask any clarifying questions you might have, end the video recording, and then thank them for participating. That's it. You now know the 7 elements of a UX research plan: the project background, research goals, research questions, key performance indicators, methodology, participants, and script. You're ready to create your own plan, and you've completed the first of the 4 steps in a UX research study: plan the study. Congratulations. Next, we'll discuss respecting privacy and user data when conducting research. These are important considerations to keep in mind as you develop your plan and conduct the study. See you then. We've covered a lot of ground on research plans and walked through each of the 7 elements. In this video, we'll switch gears and discuss how to respect user privacy and data. We'll get into why privacy is important and the type of data you need to protect. We'll also think about what you can do as a designer to ensure user privacy. This part of research is really important, so let's get to it. Why is it important that you keep user data private? It's just the right thing to do. For ethical reasons, when conducting research, we should always act with integrity, and that includes protecting users' privacy. There are also several other reasons that privacy is so critical. One reason is privacy laws and ethics. If you don't maintain your users' privacy, you could be violating the law. In the United States, there are several regulations on information privacy, and in other parts of the world, privacy is more thoroughly legislated. Another reason why privacy is so important is the risk of hacking. You need to secure sensitive data to avoid getting hacked and risk hackers sharing users' data without their consent. This has happened in a lot of recent high-profile cases and is definitely something you want to avoid. A final reason privacy and data security is important is for protecting your company's brand. In other words, this is about ensuring that your users perceive your brand positively based on their experience with you. By emphasizing data protection, you gain their trust. And even though your research participants aren't necessarily customers, their perceptions about you and your company matter. Now let's discuss what user data needs protecting. There are 2 main types of data you need to protect. The first is personally identifiable information, or PII. This is made up of specific details that could be used to identify a user. This includes names, home addresses, email addresses, and phone numbers. The other type of data is sensitive personally identifiable information, or SPII, and it's even more critical. SPII is data that, if lost, compromised, or stolen, could cause your users financial harm or embarrassment, or potentially lead to their being discriminated against. This includes social security numbers, driver's license numbers, passport numbers, financial account numbers, date of birth, race, disability status, gender, sexuality, criminal history, and medical information. I bet you can imagine how these pieces of data could cause someone harm if they got into the wrong hands, and especially if these pieces of data are used together. The good news is that you can protect your users' data by making privacy and security a part of your UX design and research practices. Okay, so how do you do this? First off, be transparent about data collection. Let your users know what data is being collected. Next, only collect user data that's absolutely essential for your study. For example, if you don't need to know a participant's date of birth, don't ask for it. Also, get active consent from your users to have their data collected and used. Active means that participants have chosen to take part in a study. Usually, participants receive a consent form, which they are asked to sign and return to the researcher. Provide detail about how you'll use participants' information and protect their privacy. For example, you might let them know that you'll share their feedback with your team, but you'll anonymize their quotes by using person 1, person 2, and so on. Alternatively, you could present a group of quotes without identifying any participants. Next, allow users to withdraw at any time. This right to withdraw should be explicitly stated when obtaining consent. Also, make withdrawing easy to do. For example, you could allow participants to withdraw in writing, verbally, or simply by not showing up. Also, inform users of who will have access to their data. You might say, I'll share your feedback with my immediate team, but it won't be shared beyond that. And finally, clearly explain how you plan to store and delete users' data once it's been used. You might let them know you'll keep their videos on a secure cloud storage site until you've completed the study, and then it will be deleted. Remember, it's your responsibility to take care of user data, security, and privacy, and it's the right thing to do. In our next video, we'll explore a couple of specific privacy concerns and tools we can use to keep data safe.
Hello again. I'm Michael. You may remember me from an earlier course. I'm briefly filling in for Jason to talk more about privacy concerns. Are you ready? Let's get started. Remember in the last video when you learned how important it is to receive user consent to collect data? Well, there are certain groups of people who have limited ability to provide their consent or have special privacy concerns. These groups are called vulnerable populations. There is not an established list of vulnerable populations, and people might have vulnerabilities that you're not aware of. Different populations can be vulnerable depending on the type of research you're doing and the various cultures you're interacting with. Some populations that might be considered vulnerable include minors, people with disabilities, people who are elderly, people who are currently incarcerated, and individuals that are members of the LGBTQIA+ community. If you're planning to do research with vulnerable participants, ask a research expert what additional steps you need to take to remain ethical and compliant with privacy law and guidelines. In addition to considering vulnerable populations, we also need to consider the safety of research data, which includes three main concerns. The first concern is data recording. It's important to document your study and results in a way that's consistent with UX research standards. Consistent documentation makes it easier to compare the results of any future studies and helps protect you and your company in case of an audit. An audit is a review from an outside party to inspect and verify that research involving people is ethical and follows the study protocol. The second concern is data storage. This is about making sure that your data is held in a way that is safe from hacking and safe from physical damage. The third concern is data retention. In this case, retention means how long you and your company hold on to research data. Some companies limit the amount of time records are kept. In other cases, you might have to comply with regulations on keeping records for a certain amount of time. Finally, you should have an agreement in place with the company you work for that lays out who keeps the research data if you leave the company. Okay, now that we've touched on a few special privacy concerns, let's check out a couple of tools you can use to maintain privacy. The first of these is de-identification. De-identification is removing any identifying information from a user's data that you collect during a study. For example, when sharing insights with the team, rather than attributing a quote to a participant by name, you might say participant 1 and change all pronouns to they. This can help reduce the amount of identifiable information about the participant that's shared with other people. Another option is to allow participants to choose their own fictitious name. This helps keep the human element instead of numbering participants like participant 1. The second tool helps protect your own data and your company's data. This is called a non-disclosure agreement, or an NDA. A non-disclosure agreement is a contract that gives one party legal protection against another party stealing their ideas. When you have your research participants test out a new product or new feature, you're letting them experience something before it's public. This puts you at risk of having your ideas stolen. But if you get your participants to sign non-disclosure agreements before there is not an established law and guidelines. In addition to considering vulnerable populations, we also need to consider the safety of research data, which includes three main concerns. The first concern is data recording. It's important to document your study and results in a way that's consistent with UX research standards. Consistent documentation makes it easier to compare the results of any future studies and helps protect you and your company in case of an audit. An audit is a review from an outside party to inspect and verify that research involving people is ethical and follows the study protocol. The second concern is data storage. This is about making sure that your data is held in a way that is safe from hacking and safe from physical damage. The third concern is data retention. In this case, retention means how long you and your company hold on to research data. Some companies limit the amount of time records are kept. In other cases, you might have to comply with regulations on keeping records for a certain amount of time. Finally, you should have an agreement in place with the company you work for that lays out who keeps the research data if you leave the company. Okay, now that we've touched on a few special privacy concerns, let's check out a couple of tools you can use to maintain privacy. The first of these is de-identification. De-identification is removing any identifying information from a user's data that you collect during a study. For example, when sharing insights with the team, rather than attributing a quote to a participant by name, you might say participant 1 and change all pronouns to they. This can help reduce the amount of identifiable information about the participant that's shared with other people. Another option is to allow participants to choose their own fictitious name. This helps keep the human element instead of numbering participants like participant 1. The second tool helps protect your own data and your company's data. This is called a non-disclosure agreement, or an NDA. A non-disclosure agreement is a contract that gives one party legal protection against another party stealing their ideas. When you have your research participants test out a new product or new feature, you're letting them experience something before it's public. This puts you at risk of having your ideas stolen. But if you get your participants to sign non-disclosure agreements before your study begins, you then have legal protection against that risk. An NDA is a contract, and if someone breaks that contract, they might have to compensate you for the loss of your idea and any profit you may have lost out on because the idea was stolen. Well, that wraps up our discussion on privacy in UX research. In the next video, we'll quickly recap what we've covered so far in this course.
Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I am a user experience researcher at Google. A user experience researcher really focuses on the user. And we really like talking to people to understand how they're using our product, whether our products or services are working well for them, and what kind of pain points they have so that we can really improve them and make them better. Ethics, privacy, and data play a huge role in our, profession. It starts as early with who we decide to speak to when we conduct research. There have historically been voices that have been marginalized or not included in research, but being a woman and being Black, I've kind of experienced a lot of different things where I understand that the experiences that I'm having were not designed with me in mind. And so for me, on a personal level, it's extremely important that the people that we talk to and that we hear from represent our user base, represent pretty much anyone in the world. Like we have to be respectful and mindful of that. Any ways that I, as an individual or my team can kind of build that more into the process, like looking into how we are recruiting, how we are conducting interviews, how we're making recommendations, how we're interpreting information, how it's being shared, and then how it's being used to build products. Every step really can create great outcomes or unintended consequences for that person that's using it. I think when it comes to privacy and data, there are a lot of different topics that we tend to get into in research, especially depending on what kind of product or service that you're working on and talking about. When we look at data across a large number of users or kind of identify patterns of how people are using things, all of which I think the public sometimes has very concerned opinions about, in terms of, do I want people knowing how many times I log into a certain account, or what kinds of websites that I'm visiting. So I think things like that are definitely alarming for people. And as researchers, just trying to respect that, understand that there's just like a variety of ways that I think we can continue to be very careful with how we treat people's data and information and stories, and just be very respectful. Try to relate to it on a personal level. If that was me, do I want someone doing that with my data? So I think if we kind of design things and conduct research in a way that respects the gravity of what we're doing and what we're putting out into the world, it can really make a difference.
Great job! You're making your way through this course and the steps of a UX research study. To begin, you learned about the 4 steps in a UX research study. Then you dove deep into the first step, planning a study. There are 7 elements of a UX research plan, and we explored each of them: the project background, research goals, research questions, key performance indicators, KPIs, methodology, participants, and script. Lastly, you investigated why and how to include data privacy in user research. Coming up, we'll move from the first step of planning a research study to the second step, conducting the research. To conduct research, we'll dig into one popular method, usability studies. See you there. Welcome back. It's great to see you again. Earlier, we explored how to plan a study, the first of 4 steps in your UX research study. We also investigated why and how to include data privacy in user research. Now it's time to move on to the second step, conducting research. Conducting research is an essential part of getting feedback from participants, but it can be tricky. It requires choosing the right study method for your design and limiting biases that are likely to pop up in our research, like attitudes and stereotypes we associate to certain people, or the tendency of participants to agree with those they like. For our lesson, we will focus on usability studies to conduct our research. Usability studies are a research method that assesses how easy it is for participants to complete core tasks in a design. We'll also explore how to reduce bias and be inclusive when conducting usability studies. Then we'll wrap up by learning how to take notes while observing participants in a usability study. This sound like a task you're up for? If so, we'll get started by learning the basics of usability studies. You know all about the first step in a UX research study, which is planning the study. It's time to move to the second step, which is really exciting, conducting the research. So let's get started. A usability study is a research method that assesses how easy it is for participants to complete core tasks in a design. During a usability study, researchers follow participants as they interact with a product. The user's feedback helps the design team make important improvements to the user experience. Usability studies can take place at various points in the design process. You can conduct a usability study when you have an early idea, like a lo-fi prototype that is only somewhat interactive. Often this is called concept testing. You can also conduct a usability study when you have an interactive prototype. This is the most common time to conduct a study because it gives the design team insight on what needs to be revised or added before the product launches. You can even conduct a usability study with a product that is complete. You may want to change a feature of the product or test if the product is usable with a specific group of people. Imagine this scenario. A local bakery has a website, but customers can't place their orders online. The bakery has asked you to create a new feature that will allow customers to order on their website. You've created a prototype of the website that includes this new feature to place an online order. You decide to conduct a usability study to understand how easy it is for users to complete an order. As part of the study, participants navigate the prototype from the landing page to checkout, acting as if they're real customers. As a researcher, you collect feedback as you watch the users interact with the prototype. In some usability studies, you can even interview participants after they're done interacting with the prototype in order to get more feedback. You might be wondering, how much feedback about my design should I get? We recommend recruiting a handful of participants for a usability study. For our examples, we'll have 5 participants in the usability study. This sample size is large enough to uncover major user issues, but small enough to keep the cost down. Let's focus on one of our usability study participants, Alex. As part of the study, Alex tries to order a birthday cake for their son on the prototype of the bakery's website. By following Alex through the ordering process, you discover that Alex's user journey hits a problem. First, the birthday cake that Alex wants to order for their son is pretty specific. They want a rectangular rainbow cake topped with rainbow sprinkles and a unicorn placed in each of the 4 corners of the cake. Alex selects a rectangular rainbow cake without any trouble, and Alex adds the rainbow sprinkles by selecting them from a drop-down menu labeled Decorations. Alex notices that unicorns are also on the decorations list, so they are selected easily. But then Alex hits a problem and veers off the happy user path. When Alex adds the unicorn decoration, there's no quantity option, so Alex can't order 4 unicorns. There's also not a section for notes, so Alex is not able to specify that the unicorn should be placed in each corner of the cake. To add to Alex's frustrations, the prototype site does not include a help button. During the usability study, Alex is open and honest about these problems. Thanks to Alex's feedback, the design team can now work out solutions to improve the bakery's website. Keep in mind, usability studies give UX designers a way to test their designs and get feedback without much risk and a lot of reward. While the user feedback might not all be positive, it will always make the product better. Coming up, we'll get to know the 2 types of usability studies, moderated and unmoderated. Let's go. Now that we know the basics of usability studies, we'll get into some specifics. There are 2 types of usability studies, moderated and unmoderated. Let's check them out. In moderated usability studies, a person guides participants through the study in real time. The person who guides participants through the study is known as the moderator. The moderator's goal is to help participants interact with the product and collect their feedback along the way. On the other hand, unmoderated usability studies do not have a designated moderator. In unmoderated usability studies, participants test out the prototypes without human guidance. Usually the study is recorded on video and the UX team reviews the video footage after the study. Moderated and unmoderated usability studies have benefits and limitations depending on the scope and goals of your study. To compare these two types, let's walk through the benefits and limitations for each in detail. We'll start with some of the benefits of moderated usability studies. First, in moderated usability studies, the moderator guides the participant through the study. For example, the moderator might show the participant where to click and ask them about their experience when taking that action. This is beneficial because participants take the exact actions you want to get feedback about. Second, moderated studies allow the moderator to ask specific questions and follow up in real time to learn more. Similarly, the moderator can rephrase a question that a participant is not understanding. This is beneficial because it allows you to collect more information that you can act on to improve your design. Third, moderated usability studies allow for rapport building between the moderator and participant, which can help the participant open up and share more feedback about the design. Building rapport is especially important if the design being tested deals with sensitive or personal issues. Okay, so moderated usability studies sound pretty great, right? Well, they also have some limitations. The moderator could influence or bias the participants. Because a person is guiding the study, there's a chance that person can accidentally let their own thoughts or feelings come into the study. Also, moderated usability studies are less flexible. It's harder to reach populations like single parents or night shift workers who may be unavailable during the daytime hours. The study can also be difficult to reschedule if a participant does not show up. In addition, there's a chance that the participant may not identify with the moderator. This could make the participant less comfortable and less open with their feedback. There are many more benefits and limitations to moderated usability studies, which you can learn about in the upcoming reading. All right, let's shift gears and think about unmoderated usability studies. Remember, unmoderated studies did not have a person guiding the participants. Let's discuss the benefits of this type of study. First, it's easier to see how a participant uses the product in the real world. In unmoderated usability studies, you give the participant a list of tasks to complete on their own. This helps you see how the participant would experience your product without a moderator guiding each step. Second, unmoderated usability studies allow participants to complete tasks on their own time and in their own space because there is no need for a moderator. This also makes it easier to schedule unmoderated studies. Third, depending on the subject matter, especially if it's sensitive, participants may feel more comfortable giving feedback without others around. As you might have guessed, there are also limitations to unmoderated usability studies. In an unmoderated usability study, participants have no human guidance. Participants get a list of fixed questions and tasks, but if they have issues or need technical assistance, there's often no one to help them. Next, unmoderated usability studies don't give the UX team an opportunity to ask the participant real-time follow-up questions. This can be limiting if the participant does not explain their problem in detail because there's no way to follow up once the UX team watches the recording. Lastly, there's little to no control over the environment to ensure you have the participant's full attention. Without a moderator present, participants could multitask and not be focused on the key activities in the study. Ultimately, to decide which type of usability study to conduct, the UX team has to consider the scope and goals of the study and the types of participants you are trying to reach. Next up, we'll talk about how usability studies are structured. Hey everyone. Now that you know the basics of usability studies, it's time to watch one in action. Earlier, you learned that usability studies can be moderated or unmoderated.
Unreal Engine games. Some of the productivity tool that has arrived in the past shaders.
These people speak French. In this course, everybody speaks French.
Commençons par mes parents.
Don't be concerned if you can't understand what they say at first.
Voilà mon père et ma mère.
Listen, watch, and get involved.
Voilà.
Pretty soon you will figure out what's going on and be able to say a few things in French yourself.
Ouais.
Over their third aperitif, Robert and Mireille are discussing education. Robert dismisses school learning as useless. Mireille springs to the defense of education and culture. Neither seems to notice that a strange man in black has taken an interest in their conversation. These people speak French. In this course, everybody speaks French.
Commençons par mes parents. Si on veut fabriquer... Alors comme ça, vous trouvez qu'on enseigne beaucoup de choses inutiles.
That a strange man in black has taken an interest in their conversation.
Il est 11h45 à l'horloge de l'observatoire. Robert et Mireille sont à l'observatoire. Il est 11h45. À l'horloge de l'observatoire. Il est 11h45. À l'horloge de l'observatoire. Robert et Mireille. Il est 11h45 à l'horloge de l'observatoire. Robert et Mireille sont encore à la terrasse de la closerie des Lilas. Ils sont en train de boire leur troisième kir.
Alors comme ça, vous trouvez qu'on enseigne beaucoup de choses inutiles. Quoi, par exemple?
Ben, je ne sais pas, moi. Presque tout. Prenez les mathématiques, par exemple. La géométrie, la trigonométrie, le calcul intégral, le calcul différentiel. À quoi ça sert, tout ça? Une fois qu'on sait faire une addition, une soustraction, une multiplication, une division, c'est tout ce qu'il faut. Et d'ailleurs, maintenant, avec les petites calculatrices électroniques et les ordinateurs, ce n'est même plus la peine d'apprendre à compter.
Oui, mais enfin, les ordinateurs, il faut quand même les programmer.
C'est la même chose pour la chimie. Toutes ces formules, à quoi ça sert? Je vous le demande. C'est peut-être bon si on veut être distillateur ou pharmacien. Ou pour raffiner de l'héroïne. Mais à part ça...
Ça peut aussi servir si on veut à fabriquer des explosifs. Malheureusement, moi j'ai toujours eu de mauvaises notes en chimie. J'ai toujours eu horreur de la chimie. Tous ces acides, ça fume, ça sent mauvais. La chimie, c'est la cuisine du diable.
Et toutes les lois de la physique, c'est la même chose. À quoi ça vous sert de connaître la loi de la chute des corps quand vous tombez d'un balcon?
Il faut savoir que quand il avait 10 ans, Robert est tombé d'un balcon à la Nouvelle-Orléans et qu'il est resté 3 semaines à l'hôpital.
Et le latin? Vous avez fait du latin, n'est-ce pas?
Oui, 6 ans. Depuis la 6e jusqu'en première.
Bon, eh bien, est-ce que vous parlez latin?
Bah non, pas vraiment.
Non, bien sûr. Vous avez fait 6 ans de latin, mais vous ne parlez pas latin. D'ailleurs, même si vous parliez latin. Latin? Avec qui est-ce qu'on peut parler latin? Je vous le demande. Même au home latin, en plein quartier latin, on ne parle pas latin.
Ave janitor.
D'accord, oui, personne ne parle plus latin. Même les curés disent la messe en français maintenant. Mais on apprend le latin pour d'autres raisons.
Ah oui? Et pourquoi, dites-moi?
Eh bien, pour... mieux savoir le français. Et puis pour la discipline intellectuelle.
Discipline intellectuelle. Discipline intellectuelle. Vous me faites rire avec votre discipline intellectuelle. Si vous voulez mon avis, faire des mots croisés au jeu au bridge est plus utile comme exercice mental.
Mais enfin, quand même, il y a une belle... littérature latine.
Ah là là, la littérature, c'est de la fiction, des mensonges, rien que des... choses qui n'existent pas. Toute cette mythologie, est-ce que ça existe? Vous en avez vu, vous, des sirènes et des... centaures. Et puis, qu'est-ce qui a jamais parlé en vers, comme dans vos tragédies classiques? La la la, la la la, la la la, la la la. Allons, voyons, c'est ridicule. C'est artificiel. Il n'y a rien de plus artificiel qu'une tragédie classique. Même les romans, ce n'est pas de la vie, c'est de la fiction.
Mais alors pourquoi est-ce que vous n'aimez pas l'histoire? Au moins ça parle de gens réels, de gens qui ont vécu, des gens qui ont influencé les événements.
Ah, si vous croyez que l'histoire vous dit la vérité, vous vous trompez. L'histoire s'est arrangée pour vous faire adopter les préjugés de votre nation. Votre pays a toujours raison et les autres ont toujours tort.
Mais alors les langues modernes, ça au moins c'est utile, non?
Pas comme on les enseigne, avec toutes ces conjugaisons, ces déclinaisons, ces listes de vocabulaire. C'est ridicule, ça ne sert à rien. On apprend des règles. De grammaire pendant 4 ans et on n'est pas capable de dire 2 phrases compréhensibles.
Enfin, j'exagère. J'ai eu de très bons professeurs d'allemand.
Mais je ne sais pas demander à quelle heure le train arrive.
C'est vrai que vous exagérez. Vous êtes amusant, mais vous exagérez. D'ailleurs, tout le monde a toujours été contre l'éducation qu'il a reçue. Heureusement que la culture, c'est ce qui reste quand on a tout oublié.
Oh. Est-ce que vous êtes sentencieuse quand vous vous y mettez?
Est-ce que je peux vous inviter à déjeuner?
C'est parce que je suis sentencieuse que vous voulez m'inviter à déjeuner?
Non, c'est parce que j'ai faim, parce qu'il va être midi, parce que je crois que vous devez avoir faim, vous aussi, que la conversation m'intéresse et que je veux la continuer.
Ça fait beaucoup de bonnes raisons, mais je ne peux pas accepter. Je rentre tous les jours déjeuner à la maison.
C'est dommage.
Quelle heure est-il? Vous avez l'heure?
Il est midi moins 5.
Oh là là, je vais être en retard. Excusez-moi, je file. Ah non, 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 ne vous dérangez pas, à bientôt. Au revoir.
Bon, maintenant, Mireille vient de partir. Elle vient de quitter la closerie des Lilas. Mais au début, où sont Mireille et Robert? Ils sont encore à la terrasse de la closerie. Ça fait longtemps qu'ils y sont. Ils ont eu le temps de boire 2 kirs. Et maintenant, ils boivent leur 3e kir. Ils sont en train de boire leur 3e kir. Regardez Marie-Laure, là. Qu'est-ce qu'elle fait? Elle est en train d'apprendre sa leçon. Et M. Bello, ici, qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Il est en train de lire le journal. Et là, qu'est-ce que les Bello font? Ils sont en train de manger. Robert et Mireille sont à la terrasse de la closerie des Lilas. Ils sont en train de boire leur troisième kir. Et Robert est en train de critiquer l'enseignement.
Alors comme ça, vous trouvez qu'on enseigne beaucoup de choses inutiles? Mais quoi, par exemple?
Ben, je ne sais pas, moi. Presque tout.
Il critique tout. Enfin, presque tout. Regardez Marie-Laure. Est-ce qu'elle a fini ses devoirs? Pas tout à fait. Presque.
Tu as fini tes devoirs?
Presque. Ça y est, j'ai fini.
Et ici, elle a mangé presque tous les chocolats.
Tu as mangé tous les chocolats?
Non, pas tous.
Oui, enfin presque tous.
Robert critique les maths. Il dit que ça ne sert à rien.
La géométrie, la trigonométrie, le calcul intégral, le calcul différentiel. À quoi ça sert? Tout ça.
Ça ne sert à rien. Ce n'est pas utile. Un crayon, oui. Un crayon, ça, c'est utile. Un crayon, ça sert à écrire. Un tire-bouchon, c'est utile. Ça sert à déboucher les bouteilles. Un couteau, c'est utile. Ça sert à couper. Une montre, c'est utile. Ça sert à savoir l'heure. Des lunettes, c'est utile, parce que ça sert à lire. Mais une cravate, ce n'est pas utile. Ça ne sert à rien. Et les mathématiques, c'est comme la cravate. Ça ne sert à rien. Enfin, Robert dit que ça ne sert à rien. Mais tout le monde n'est pas d'accord.
Les maths me paraissent très utiles.
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez des maths? Est-ce que c'est utile? Très utile. Tu crois que c'est utile, les maths?
Oui, je pense bien.
Bien sûr, il faut savoir faire les additions. Vous savez faire une 2 ôter de 3, reste 1. Ça fait 16. Il faut savoir faire aussi une multiplication. 43 multiplié par 12, par exemple, ça fait 2 fois 3, 6. 6. 2 fois 4, 8. 1 fois 3, 3. 1 fois 4, 4. 6, 8 et 3, 11, 4 et 1, 5. Il faut aussi savoir faire une division. 436 divisé par 8, voyons, ça fait en 43, combien de fois 8 5 fois 8, 40. 5 fois 8, 40, ôté de 43, reste 3, j'abaisse le 6. 36, en 36, combien de fois 8 4 fois, 8 fois 4, 32, oui. 4 fois, 8 fois 4, 32, ôté de 36, reste 4. Ça fait 54 et il reste 4.
Moi, mon pote, je sais tout faire.
Non, si on veut...
Tout un tas de choses.
À quoi ça sert?
Je serai la première à qui j'en parlerai.
Ça va pas, non? J'ai horreur de ce test. C'est malin.
Mireille a toujours eu horreur de la chimie parce que ça sent mauvais.
Tous ces acides, ça fume, ça sent mauvais. La chimie, c'est la cuisine du diable.
Elle a horreur de la chimie parce qu'il y a toujours des acides qui fument. Ça fume, ça sent mauvais. Ça sent bon. Les parfums, ça sent bon. La soupline aussi, ça sent bon.
Et puis chez nous, tout le monde adore l'odeur de soupline de lavande.
La moutarde, ça sent fort. C'est le verbe sentir. Écoutez. Ça sent drôle.
Ça sent drôle. C'est toi qui sens comme ça?
Tous ces acides, ça fume, ça sent mauvais. La chimie, c'est la cuisine du diable.
D'après Robert, la physique ne sert à rien non plus.
À quoi ça vous sert de connaître la loi de la chute des corps quand vous tombez d'un balcon?
Ça sert à rien d'étudier le latin. Parce qu'on l'étudie pendant des années, mais on ne le sait pas assez bien pour le parler.
Mais on apprend le latin pour d'autres raisons.
Ah oui? Et pourquoi, dites-moi?
Eh bien, pour mieux savoir le français.
Le latin est utile pour apprendre à mieux parler le français, par exemple.
Autrefois, on parlait latin. Mais maintenant, c'est fini. On ne parle plus latin. Même aux hommes latins, on ne parle pas latin. Si vous dites bonjour, disez la messe en latin.
Pater. Et cuire 2 œufs sur le plat. Alors qu'il y a quelque part.
Et pourquoi, dites-moi?
À ton avis, celle-ci ou celle-là?
À mon avis, celle-là.
Alors, Manu, ça te plaît pas?
Non.
Ah, ben je suis bien de son avis.
Robert critique la littérature latine. À son avis, ce n'est que des mensonges. C'est de la fiction. La mythologie, les sirènes, les centaures, ça n'existe pas. Ce sont des mensonges. Ce n'est pas vrai.
Maman! Marie-Laure a encore mangé tous les biscuits.
C'est pas vrai. C'est un mensonge. C'est pas moi.
Ce n'est pas vrai.
Maman! Marie-Laure a encore mangé tous les biscuits.
C'est pas vrai. C'est un mensonge. C'est pas moi.
Tu es encore en train de manger des chocolats.
Moi, non. Je ne mangeais pas le chocolat. Je travaillais.
Ah oui? C'est vrai ce mensonge?
Marie-Laure dit qu'elle travaillait. Mais c'est un mensonge. Ce n'est pas vrai. D'après Robert, les tragédies classiques, c'est ridicule, parce que tout le monde, ce n'est pas un personnage. L'histoire, c'est arrangé, c'est manipulé. L'histoire déforme la vérité. La vérité, qu'est-ce que c'est la vérité? Il y a plusieurs vérités. Il y a une vérité française, il y a une vérité allemande, une vérité américaine, une vérité russe. Enfin, on peut dire que la vérité, c'est le contraire du mensonge. Mensonge, vérité. Mais Tout le monde voit la vérité d'une façon différente. Vous savez comment les Français représentent la vérité? Ils représentent la vérité comme une jeune femme nue qui sort d'un puits et qui tient un miroir. Vous êtes contre ou vous êtes pour? Et l'art, les artistes, vous êtes pour ou vous êtes contre?
Vous êtes un artiste. J'oublie.
On reçoit un paquet. Tenez, regardez Mireille ici. Elle reçoit un paquet. On reçoit des cadeaux. On reçoit des lettres. Maintenant, écoutez Mireille. Elle va être un peu pompeuse, un peu sentencieuse.
Heureusement que la...
Il est déjà midi moins 5. Ça sent bon? Non. Ça sent mauvais. Ça pue. Regardez. Qu'est-ce qui est arrivé à ce monsieur? Il est tombé d'un balcon. Le Home Latin, c'est loin du quartier latin? Non, c'est en plein quartier latin. Regardez Robert ici. Qu'est-ce qu'il fait? Il fait des mots croisés. Elle a faim. Maintenant, regardez. Pour vous dites, à quelle heure est-ce que le train arrive? Voilà, c'est ça. Regardez Marie-Laure ici. Est-ce qu'elle a faim ou est-ce qu'elle a mal aux dents? Elle a faim. Maintenant, regardez. Pourquoi est-ce que le professeur a toujours une cravate? Hein? À quoi ça sert? Je vous le demande.
À rien. Pourquoi est-ce que vous avez toujours un bâton? À quoi ça sert? À quoi ça sert? Mais c'est très utile, monsieur Robert. Mais non. Mais si. Ça ne sert à rien de discuter avec ces gens-là. Allez, je file. Au revoir. À bientôt.
Read Thai in 10 Days by Bingo Lingo and the audio recordings are protected by copyright. Reproduction of any Read Thai in 10 Days by Bingo Lingo component is strictly prohibited. สวัสดีครับ Welcome to Read Thai in 10 Days by Bingo Lingo. These recordings accompany the book and are intended to serve as a pronunciation guide for learners who do not wish to use the phonetically written Thai, which by its nature will not provide a completely accurate match with the actual spoken Thai.